Hello, everyone. The title of tonight's episode is From Self-Creation to World Creation, and the lecture is on conscious change. Now, I find this to be a very interesting topic because it involves a bit of my prediction of what I feel is going to happen in for the future generations. Let us begin from the picture I've chosen. We see this child looking at the world in front of him. We see this child using the tools of this world. And we see this child fundamentally recognizing that life is an opportunity to engage with a world that was made before you were. When I say from self-creation to world creation, this is a theme of the day that has come to me. I've just, like, one idea has approached me more than once in the day. And the notion is that right now we are trying to create ourselves. The act of procreation is to continue our genetic pattern, to pass on our touch of DNA to the future. So we fundamentally see that people are interested in creating people for the maintenance of the species. Now, I find that after a person has explored all the dimensions of an individual self, they will eventually wonder about the collective and the empty. The collective and the empty is a very interesting state of mind because it is where your questioning has taken you to some degree, like your doubt is knocking on a door of wondering how your intelligence functions. Is it individual or is it collective? Pretty much, are you a drop in an ocean or are you an ocean in a drop? Is your free will a product of universal, like the universe, or is the universe a product of your free will? And that is where the human being finds itself. So think of it this way, that when somebody talks to another person, they're trying to find themselves in the other. And what that means is they're trying to understand the other person, but they're left in their own world because they don't have that other person's eyes. So what really happens is that, think of it this way, you're seeing the world that's real, the other person's seeing the world that's real. Now the way you guys each sees the world that is real is different because the self is different. So in some sense, when you are having a conversation with someone, when we see two people debate on YouTube, for example, these atheists and theists debate on YouTube, what we see is two different people sitting into two different worlds, two different chairs of conceptual existence, and debating which one is more valid. And fundamentally, we can't ignore our emotions, because I find a child emotionally develops before intellectually. That means every child has, to some degree, some certain range of emotional intelligence. Now, through certain spiritual practice, especially those who take an extreme approach to finding out something that's true, it's both good and bad. It's not, not like what is good now could be bad for the next thousand years, and what is bad now could be good in the next 1,000 years. Who knows? But pretty much what I'm trying to get to is that when we wake up, the creation of the self has begun. The moment identifies with the movement of the objective and the movement of the subjective. When you become aware of subjective movement, we consider that the ideology or the ideological self. That means this is the version of you that thinks it's a self, it's an idea. Now, what's very fascinating is that your attention is considering the idea of you different than the idea of the world, yet they are both instant generations. So fundamentally, we're just attention to phenomena. We choose to categorize or identify this based on patterns. And the brain is a sort of pattern, working with patterns kind of system. You know, you can say that the evolution of your life story is the patterns that your decisions entered in your life or allowed in your life. Now, what I'm trying to get to is that we are going to create selves. Right now, our art of technology suggests AI. You know, Ray Kurzweil talks about the singularity. We see that we're trying to reach a point where we create something as intelligent as us. So we are still in the self-creation phase. Now, if we took the simulation theory to such a level, like Alan Watts touched upon this, other people have touched upon it in science fiction works, but the idea follows that the person masters the realm of the self. Pretty much the dude becomes immortal, and in some sense, his consciousness lives on through advanced computers for millions of years. And the person eventually accumulates so much data that they understand how the universe moves or how the universe was eventually created. Imagine a sort of immortal existence. So, like the knowledge of an immortal being, um, immortality intellectually, like takes you towards emotion. Trust me, this life is hilarious. You're kind of like dropped in one corner of it, and your values are based on that corner, but there's other corners to life. There's other ways that people are watching, looking at the world as we speak. We can either consider the progress of humanity to be either in one world or the progress of 8 billion worlds and growing. Either we're looking at the tree's branches or we're looking at the trunk, whatever way we choose to see reality made up. You know, we can see reality only in a singular dimension, just make objectivity our God. You know, we can just make a subjectivity our God. That's pretty much the religious domain and the domain of ideal worship. When you worship objects, they call that idol worship. This is what Mr. Within is saying. When you worship subjects, they call that ideal worship. And trust me, right now, 2019, oh, consumerism equals ideal worship. That means you fall in love with a future version of yourself in this moment, and that future version of yourself is the success of the response to the sales pitch. That means, think of it this way: people are not trying to just sell you stuff in stores. The world is trying to sell itself. The human being needs to express its reality to clarify it to itself. Confidence is, in some sense, built through exposure to repetitive experience in turbulent times. That means a man who has fought in, like, let's say 100 wars is different, has a different way that that man stands compared to a person who's fighting his first war. So we have to go through life. You know, sometimes there's no solution. That moment, the design of that moment just needs to be responded to, and just the whole program of existence moves forth. So I am kind of saying that after we have mastered the creation of the self, as Alan Watts says, after you have had every other dream, what dream would you want next? You would see, after you have, your free will has lived as a individual speck of dust in a light beam, like after you have experienced many ways that yourself exists, you're going to seek many ways that the world exists. So that means we created selves first. Now technology evolves to such a point, or just our ability evolves to such a point as creatures, that we begin creating worlds. And now when we create these worlds, imagine we create a world that other beings can be created in. So pretty much think of it this way. If we say individual senses of self or people lead to like how can I say it? The act of intercourse creates a new course, which is the child's life. So we can say there's a sort of intercourse of worlds, and our world has been birthed. It has been birthed from a subjective inspiration and an objective inspiration. And trust me, what the greatest contribution that mathematics did is it gave man a permission to acknowledge multiplicity. For me, something that, believe it or not, the most one thing that drew me to mathematics was irrational numbers. They shocked me. As if how can you say the value of a number that never ends? You see? Like some people like actual pies, and some people like mathematical pies. So I find that the peak of our technology and the peak of biological evolution, which one can say is innate universal technology, their peak will go for the highest state of responsibility for their reality. So you as a moment in your waking state of being, like when you wake up in the day, that's that sense of self of you. Be very playful with who you think you are. Don't take yourself way too seriously. At the same time, seriously pay attention to yourself. You know, and so I find that in that there's a perfect balance of observing yourself and then realizing that the concept of self and the concept of world are codependent. They arise together as if they are like a couple entering a ballroom. Like your sense of self depends on your sense of world. So pretty much your senses are in a world and they make you up. And so the moment is a fabrication. So our minds receive reality as if out of nowhere, suddenly my eyes have opened, right? So suddenly all our theories will go towards from nothingness, something came. That'll become like the profound philosophical position of our mainstream culture, which it is. You know, scientists believe that something came from nothing, but they believe that nothing was not nothing. It was just something that wasn't this something. The process is confusing because just like how we blink, you know, and just like how we sleep, the world blinks, there's oscillations of the continuity of intelligence through non existence and existence. What I mean by that is that throughout the day, you're a character in a story where you have certain moments in the storyline entering your unconscious. So, pretty much, my attention is like above water when it's not asleep, or when it's sleeping, it's below water. So what that's a metaphor I'm using it as in the sense that it's a different texture of existential sensitivity, you know. So how fascinating would it be that we recognize that the mind exists in a multidimensional condition, but the body exists in just one condition, one in just one dimension of a condition, right? And so, what is this soul has been considered by ancient traditions to be the witness, the ultimate watcher of phenomena in the moment. That's pretty much the truth of the truth. It is that which is watching the truth. So, what that means is like, imagine you see a stage like a theater performance, but you are like an audience member in the front seat and only one in the front row, and you don't see all the people who've sat behind you, and you think you're the only one watching this theater or play or something. So your first impulse is like you feel the value of what existence revealed to you only is for you. You have not wondered if the eyes of the universe are on earth. And believe it or not, they're so on earth that they write books about. For me, when you look at the concept of conscious change, you wonder what does that mean? right? How can you be conscious in the same way if you're changing? And what the idea suggests is that throughout your whole life, through every birthday that you've blown a candle and you were like, oh man, it's my birthday. Do you see? That has been a sort of simulation. It's kind of been very profound that your physical body has been changing, your ideology has been changing, but somehow you say it's still the same me, even though I've aged. So I believe fundamentally the way language is designed, it is metaphysical. Language is extremely metaphysical. You say, my mind, my body, my hand. What is that my? And so I have concluded that that my is an attributeless attention, and based on the movement and noise generated in the moment, meaning arises. Meaning arises through activity to some degree. It's very few, I think, very limited beings who the meaning enters their life when things become empty. I feel those people who become really chaotic, that's what they're seeking. Sometimes I feel violence occurs because like an attention gets caught into an animalistic pattern. I mean, like, I'm not denying evolution. I'm just saying there's more than one evolution. Okay. Now, I agree with the biological evolution, guys, because regardless of what Darwin said, I just like, this is crazy what I'm going to tell you. But what I did was that I put my two hands on the ground, okay, and I just wondered about the motion of my hand. So I legit like just thought like, okay, let me just stand like a lion for a second, and I just put my two hands and I wondered, and then I thought, oh my god, like since my childhood they told me wear like cover your like wear a good jacket or something so the wind doesn't hit you and you get like a cold or something, right? So I thought, why is like the chest the vulnerable area requiring scarf protection, right? So I kind of got the sense, okay, it makes sense that we were four-legged animals and our chest area is more sensitive, let's say, to wind and stuff because it was like we were on four limbs. So like our backs became much more less sensitive than, for example, the front of our body, let's say. Right, so I thought about this and I'm like, okay, there is some sort of organic material that resembles other animals and it's changing. But the mysteries of evolution go deeper than the ape's sophisticated ability to communicate. That means one way we're fascinated by evolution, we're like, holy shit, this one species of like chimpanzee and some unknown factor, has now created this species can speak and it builds sky rises and it's building AI and all this while the dolphins don't do shit. They're just swimming in the water. All the animals are just still living in some dimension of still their own world. So I find the ability that you are not a human being unless you can see another world. Because that's the difference between animals. Animals are just they are in they're it's like nature's program is still dictating them. The program of free will has not entered some animals. They are free, but they are only free in a domain. They cannot question their freedom. That means there's a sort of uniqueness there. So what I'm trying to tell you is that change becomes an activity of consciousness. And the observer of change is where the mystical excellence is in some sense discovered. So for me, people should go towards meditation and yoga not just because they think it's cool or something. Like when you go towards meditation, you're going towards experiencing levels of meaning of the moment through stillness and silence, and in some sense, the settlement of thought. That means if your mind was a pond and every thought was just like how the stimulus of the moment's environment translated into some subjective concept or context. For me, it's fascinating. I thought, like, I still theorize in these talks. Yeah, I say, like, the biology exists, to translate into subjectivity. So if they tell me what is the purpose of materialistic life, I will tell you it is to, in some sense, wonder about the immaterial. As if objects are here to, and through the intelligence of the human being, are translated into subjects. It's not just like the inventor gets thoughts and then makes the invention. Sometimes inventions lead to new thoughts. So responsibility gets deepened. So you become that species that at first you're like, oh man, everybody's selfish. Everybody's just selling fish all the time. and And so, what I mean by that is that we are in our own worlds. We're 8 billion individual worlds without a common direction. Our common direction is too in our subconscious. That means people are subconsciously are good, but consciously they're still like in a concrete jungle. You know what I mean? The concrete jungle is still a jungle, which means it doesn't matter how much of a suit you put on, you can still be animalistic in your intent. For me, I call these I've seen many people, many systems that categorize different ways that man's emotions provide intelligence for him. That means you can say anger is when your intelligence is reduced because you are convinced what you see is the only truth. This is why you can't really convince an angry man when he's really angry, because he feels what he sees is so true that she's getting angry to shout at others like, shut up. So what I'm saying is that Sogyal Rinpoche, I believe that was his name, this Tibetan Zen master, not Zen master, this Tibetan Buddhist master of some wisdom, this Tibetan Buddhist man, he said a quote that I'm just telling you the concepts, but he said something like, unless you conquer anger, your enemies are inexhaustible. That means sometimes when you get angry, you might blame it on people, but you can also blame it on the whole condition of the moment. And the moment is how your mind is apparent to you. That's what consciousness is. You notice something is here that has a known value and an unknown value. And people have different relationship with the unknown. Most people mask it. Some people say how the universe happens is the mysteries of God. Scientists look at the universe and are like, these are the mysteries of nature. So like the way the word the scientist uses for nature is the same word that the religious guy is using for God. But the religious mindset sees a certain predesigned intention, as if the book of Revelation is how this world was meant to be walked. It's like an instruction booklet for the creature, right? But it is also some of man's early attempts, like 6th century attempts to kind of bring order out of some sort of chaos. And that's what I think that's been happening. I think indirectly all our ancestors wanted to live in a peaceful world, even though they saw it wasn't possible and they had to like be tough and shit and get through it. But like, I think indirectly our species has evolved with a constant wonder of what if it was more peaceful? What if it was more peaceful? In some sense, man, we were creatures that you can say we were very animalistic. That means a hunter-prey mentality is in our evolution deeply. It's a pattern that's deeply there based on the behavior of us as a creature and a sort of collective pattern of memory going on. One can say one's memory, one can say their DNA is the eyes of their ancestor, as if like how my ancestor lived, my ancestor's karma had an influence on my karma. You see? And that's what DNA is in some sense. So now I guess after explaining all this, I can get more closer to the idea of what I mean by world creation. World creation is something unique. I think it's something that many people don't take advantage of. They don't consider the value of not being able to just think a new thing about themselves, but to think a new thing about how the world is designed. Fundamentally, we can solve world peace by saying that we all human beings are designers. You see, we all design our methodology, our philosophy, we adopt it, and it's based on the alignment of our excitement and awareness of the moment that our life happens. So I'm telling you, dear listener, we're all orphans in existence in some sense. You see, nobody has our eyes. Our eyes are here alone. You see? But we have an ability somehow after 4 billion years. We are standing here in front of computers, speaking through the nervous system of the species that seems to be evoking a sort of digital body for the society. Whether man enters the future of technology to be immortal, or whether man remembers nature's eternal kind of changeless view of change, whichever path you take, I'm telling you, this universe is dancing. It's dancing its own to its own tune. Do you see? And it's dancing in a way that it makes part of itself known, part of itself unknown. Do you see? One can say that the unknown evokes something in you to know. And you see this in even kids, you know? Some one kid hears that there's a party, he's like, holy shit, some unknown event. Let me see if I could go make it known. So now, the relationship one can have with world creation, I consider this part of something I'm probably going to speak about. Like, I've decided to attempt to speak, like, I don't know, for 6 hours on this concept of advanced communication. But this is something in the future, some long, it's going to be probably the longest talk I've ever given, you know. But there's a lot to kind of share. So the notion of world creation is that, so what I've been telling you is that you're in a moment, and in the moment, due to evolutionary behavior of our ancestors and whatever, we are in a position where we see ourselves as a self in a world, and this self finds itself separate from the world, so then it has created worlds of engagement. It has been able to make itself a character from the setting of the story rather than just being the setting moving. Do you see? So we have become nature's ability to look at itself in ways that never existed before. That is the value of your eyes, and to be honest, that's the value of creativity, because nobody has your eyes. Just share. The world will be astonished at some point, you know. So this relationship of self and world will eventually infuse into an background interconnectivity. So you're going to kind of see all atoms and manifestation are hovering in space. And they say even 99 point whatever some percent, like 9% of atom is empty space. I was like, what the fuck? So what happens is right now the relationship is you think yourself knows and you consider the world unknown. When that relationship switches, endless creativity arises, because your creativity is not coming from something you have to think. You know, it's as if you become the unknown factor in the fields of knowledge, you know. So it's very interesting what I'm saying, because I'm saying that I always wondered why in ancient books, you know, like the Upanishads or something, these ancient Vedic books, they would say the greatest yogis would be like children. I was like, what the? I was like, okay, that's kind of strange, you know. And why would it be necessary if the idea is to transcend the ego? The why would the yogi be childlike? And I wondered what the child has that the adult forgets. And you know what it is? It's just less conclusions about reality. Because your depression, stress, or whatever emotion that enters comes from a conclusion, comes from a relationship of how you felt past, how you felt in the past is pretty much how the emotions in your past are being transferred into a future projection. So what that means is like you were happy, you were sad yesterday, you suddenly became happy now. And so not only was there an emotional progression, but each emotion brought memories with it. When I become emotional, that's when my mind suddenly, as if like has an avalanche of ideology, avalanche of thoughts, not an avalanche of any ideology, memories. Sometimes when I get very emotional, sometimes even in these talks, like there was a moment where I got emotional. But what occurred was that emotions are used. You see, like my relationship, and I don't know if my way is the correct way, guys. I'm just sharing what I see. And how I see it is that I could think I'm something, but if I do, then I have to create stories of identification with everything. So I have my emotions will become dependent on how I feel the emotions of the group are. Sometimes you gotta be careful when you walk with the crowd because you might stop living as yourself. You know, I consider many people are living as the environments they're in. That means a lot of their behavior is defined by the by the by the behavior of the environment. Sometimes truth will lie to you. That means the truth of one world will become the lie of the next. If we were 8 billion designers, 8 billion people who had no emotional belief or ideological belief, not just, and we were just had this flexible mindset, and we all imagined somehow could communicate, and we were like, holy shit, this world we're all living in, we can totally just put it on pause and one like create a new dimension. I'm telling you, we gotta resketch our civilization. And we gotta resketch it towards the potential of the civilization rather than you pretty much want to make it easier for the children to come on this world, for the children who will be born on this earth. You just want to make it a bit easier for them, and you want to make it easier in a way where imagine schools were they were such valuable institutions in the future that the child felt an honor. You know, when you feel honor, like why was it that like, you know, when King Arthur and his all the knights were on the round table or whatever, why were the knights like not just like, you know, messing around and not paying attention? Why were they all very attentively there? Because where they stood had a value that was valuable to the community, to all, right? So I'm telling you, when you develop a relationship with phenomena where rather than you trying to know it, you consider that you are the unknown movement in the known universe. So what happens is you become like is it? Like, every moment you watch how knowledge is created, because you're not so stuck on a certain way things have to be. You truly see things. So when, for example, when you go into nature, those people go in nature and they're like, oh my God, nature, it's like they're not comfortable. Let me tell you, your discomfort is echoing in nature. And when I go to nature, that's when my free will has already bowed to the earth that it has arose from. Do you know this is what I'm saying? Is like I'm not one of those guys who's like a tree lover. Like I don't have an ideology over trees. But there's been moments where I've walked past the tree and I just intuitively in my mind I saw an image of myself putting my hand on the tree. So I went and put my hand on the tree. And when I put the hand on that tree, it was as if for a moment I felt the antiquity of matter. I felt we are totally taking for granted the evolutionary opportunity. Kids should not be in like third world countries, kids should not be in sweatshops working. The economy is denying the spotlight of the species on the ingenuity and creative potential. Imagine like children in schools, their homework assignments were our world's biggest problems rather than them getting prepared for economical survival. I mean, economical survival is important. Sometimes you need a bit of chaos in life to advance the order, because the moment you enter an extreme, chaos and order in some sense, like if you become too chaotic of a being, the order is going to become, your chaos is going to become meaningless. This is why, just like how in certain lab tests, they've put like this alpha rat and this beta rat, and this alpha rat and this beta rat, kind of like this bigger rat and this smaller rat, they would go into these kind of wrestling fights. Okay, this is rats. Okay, this was done in a laboratory test, and so they noticed that the bigger rat, the alpha rat, wouldn't, like, rather than winning all the time, would let himself lose. So the weaker rat had a purpose to play the game. If the weaker rat constantly lost, there would be no point. Do you see? So that was a sort of system where the ruthlessness of chaos still needed the order to still be itself. Do you see? Evil might destroy good, but it will never destroy good completely. And good may destroy evil, but it will never destroy it completely. That means Batman, in the back of his mind, probably hopes that villains never stop. Now, just like how thoughts of yourself, if I tell you think about yourself, what you're going to be doing tomorrow, a certain image can arise in your mind. Now, people's minds are different. For some people, language arises first. They're more linguistic creatures internally. There are some people who are more just image-based creatures. For them, the world doesn't have a story, yet it is filled with beautiful imagery. But for those who the world has a story, the world has the potential for the infinite. Do you see? When you try to just make objectivity the only truth, you are in some sense denying yourself an infinite unknown, and you will regret it. This is why you shouldn't take an allegiance to external reality. My opinion is, even though we should progress as a species, we should not get too obsessed with our external behavior. Because your whole life, pretty much, and not just you, everybody on this planet, they're obsessed with themselves. Because the idea of survival constantly, like an alarm clock, hits them, and it's like, what are you going to do about this moment? What are you going to do about this moment? And so people are constantly obsessed with the idea of themselves. And the idea of self in today's society is being valued for its individuality. We're saying, look at what that individual's doing. Oh my God, look at that individual being an icon of our times. And so we are in some sense worshipping idols, But these idols are no longer physical, they're people. Do you see? So it's like more advanced objective meaning has a proportionately also increased more emotional value. So the more complex we could understand our activity, the more emotions and beauty poured into the world. If I tell you, you know what the most fundamental inspiration of genius is? Mortality. To realize that you're here for some time, but the sands in the hourglass will eventually come to an end. And so when you really, enlightenment is when you break the hourglass of an infinite illusion into a sort of eternal content. You learn to dance with the unknown, and so your mind opens. And then world creation just becomes you watching how thoughts arise. Have you ever watched a thought arise? I think most people are trying to not have thoughts, you know, or they're so stuck in thinking that they are a thought that if they stop thinking they're a thought, they feel like their relationship with language is going to change. And honestly, it will. But I think it's necessary because just a mystery of evolution is like, okay, I get it. It took billions of years for this ape to evolve, but what the hell is that caterpillar doing in a short time, totally become a different creature? The caterpillar has legs, as if its biology is kind of like wants to experience having legs, then wants to fly. Do you know? So for me, evolution is change, but how fast is the change? And how instantaneous can there be instant change? Because that's kind of what enlightenment seems to be when you go read all the ancient stories. Something changed. The person saw or was present in a way that they did not have access before. And I find you find that through a sort of uh, accepting your road and kind of walking your journey and trusting that the unknown is the next teacher of knowledge. If you were connected to some supercomputer that could give you every knowledge, every language, you suddenly knew everything, had everything, you were just everywhere at once, you'd kind of become a digital sort of omnipresence or omniscience of knowledge. And eventually you'll be like, holy shit, after you've learned from everything that you know, you just wait to see the unknown. This is why I feel that religion, it's strange, but somehow, I feel it's coincidence that it has managed to keep the unknown as its fundamental truth. So nobody knows what religion is about. Because what man can say he knows what God's mind is thinking even in this moment? For me, revelation is remarkable. I personally consider myself since a kid being like as if the way life had designed my steps on this earth was towards the mystical. That means I felt an inner alienation, a sort of inner isolation with how, like, I felt how can I tell you? Do you know how many people don't step out of their minds? What that means is reality is more justified by how their feelings rationalize. So what I mean by that is like it's an intersection of the dimension of your emotions with the dimension of how thought is taking form. Just like how an image in your mind, I say an apple, you can just visualize the letters APPLE, for example, and also see an actual apple beside it, like that's simple to visualize. So similarly, you took one reference point and you changed it into a letter. You see, like we have the physical apple, but then we write apple and a notebook. We have changed matter into subjective phenomena, or subject, like a symbol is like the reflection of matter in our minds, or a reflection of a sort of world of meaning. And by the way, guys, if you're listening to this and you have any thoughts during this, just type them in the chat. I'll eventually come to comment on them. You know. Anyways, so when you get to a point where you want to create new worlds, you suddenly begin thinking how the world is watching you rather than just how you are watching the world. And when you wonder how the world is watching you, you feel a sense of responsibility, a sort of rekindled energetic realization that you thought you were here for yourself, but yourself comes from the world, so you have always been here for the world. Trust me, when you find the love of the species, when you attain that sense of inner intuitive, it just comes on its own. That means you just trust life, and it just, life trusts you, and it opens for you. And even though I say all these concepts, guys, there isn't always an alignment to my behavior throughout the day with what I say. For me, it's an exploration. If somebody comes and tells me like, yo man, like this is why rumors for me are just like massive. Like for me, dishonesty is a waste of my energetic attention. That means, like somebody said, don't rent space in your mind to what is inefficient for you. That means, trust me, you can let go of thoughts as simply as you take off like your blazer. You can stare into the civilization's advancement and gaze at a limitless sky. So here's the thing. Our individuality is going to dissolve into a collective purpose. Pretty much just the nature of time and change in this material universe automatically will take us towards a collective sort of, it's like, okay, if we are 8 billion, not just bodies on this planet, but 8 billion minds, and each person's mind is gazing, it's like having new views on life every day. So how can we not have great ideas? Like I feel like the solutions of the world are in our species, are in people. Sometimes the greatest efficiency just comes from the greatest response to the condition. We can't get rid of violence unless we care to. And we can only care to if it's required for the future's efficiency. Success can mean nothing else other than efficient vision. And efficiency means that if you do the wrong action, guess what? It doesn't matter how you feel, it's the wrong action. Like when there's glass broken on the ground and you don't wear slippers, wrong action. Regardless of if you think you're enlightened or not, you're walking on glass, man. So I'm saying that objective reality makes us pay attention to systems and design. But a deeper metaphysical self-inquiry leads you towards an experiential movement. So people who, like, if you want to experience something more than language, mysticism should be interesting for you. But be careful, because language is the world. So you gotta let your own intuition guide guide you in how your decency can arise. When you become a decent person, it's just an emotion. When you get that sort of emotion, a sort of emotion where you are not resisting your world and the world is not resisting you, then the mind aligns and you become a watching intelligence from the stillness and the silence, and language and image and all your senses become like a sort of piano keys that just the unknown navigates. That means they asked Prophet Muhammad, uh, peace be upon him, as they say, was asked about the soul, and he said the soul was the secret of God, and God was a sort of unique symbol that was the what was within all, and was at the same time what was watching all. As if God is the ocean and we're all selfish fish, swimming in this ocean. World creation comes best and more freely from having no identity ascribed yet. Leo Tolstoy, this profound Russian or Ukrainian writer, he had what he said in his writings was very profound. He said, "Time, the strongest warriors are time and patience." And it took me a couple seconds to process that statement, because I wondered, like, I instantly understood how time was the greatest, strongest warrior, because it was the conqueror spirit. It was the spirit that was like, regardless of what is thrown, my steps have been predestined. Like, this is why destiny is such a powerful concept, because it provides your inspiration with endless effort. You feel you were meant to be somewhere. You will become the roar of the lion of the And so in this moment, Mr. Within shall say perhaps one of the most important statements. Is God dancing in our minds, or are we dancing in God's mind? Is the known and the unknown like a yin-yang symbol? That means regardless of what, however, like regardless of how much unknown comes, there's something in the unknown that knows. And regardless of how much we know, there's something that's unknown. So for me, this is unique. I'm constantly wondering, why are we put as creatures first of all, on a rock in the middle of nowhere? That's pretty weird. Yeah? Existence is weird, guys. I'm telling you. This is why you can't judge people. The whole system's weird. So if we consider that we're dancing in God's mind, we will consider that our free will is part of the macrocosmic free will. And what that means is, this is what, like, when I went to India, you know how it felt to me? I went to Rishikesh, India, and I went very simply. I stayed in an ashram for a while. Of course, I was there for some yoga instructor course, which I completed, But when I was there, I noticed the behavior. I noticed a sort of unique cultural atmosphere that wasn't present in other countries. And I noticed that they had somehow, even though there's the caste system, and that was brutal to some eyes, but I'm telling you, it was as if the metaphysical history of the land was still echoing in people's minds. And so there were many people who acknowledged a sort of world of like God's presence in those who behave in God's ways. that trip was a very unique trip for me because I noticed the limits of myself in the limitless attributes of my world. And the self that doubted died. So, as if, like, in the same way, perhaps, as Rene Descartes says, like Rene Descartes was this French philosopher who, in some sense, had his approach was a sort of methodical doubt. So, what he had a sort of method where he's like, you gotta ultimately doubt things, and then when you ultimately doubt things, you come to certain truths. And so, the truth that he had discovered was that you can't doubt this sort of subjective consciousness that is here. You can't doubt the doubter, that there's a doubter here, something like that. And so that's a very unique notion, because also Rene Descartes talked about the mind and body's dualism, as if the mind is in a world of its own and the body is in a world of its own. But somehow we're in the middle. Your relationship with your moment can be an eternity, or can be a sort of temporal performance of the greatest caliber. For me, life, like, excuse me, it's very important to cultivate sincere contentment. This is one of those Mr.Within things that I hope you listen to. And so what I mean by that is that you let beauty reveal itself. You find a sort of patience to allow life to happen, and that's a sort of sincere contentment. And the problem with lies is, like, I'm telling you, there's different sorts of liars. There's some people who it's very easy for them to be a different person to different people by lying, or in some sense manipulating the truth. It's very easy to do that, but what it means is that you'll be different people to different people. But if you realize the value of just being honest and trying to just be your natural self, that means you're not here to, per se, just fit in. You're here to just naturally be you, and whatever you are, we're trying to build a society that respects everybody's intelligence. That means your intelligence is based on the potential that your intelligence has. And the potential of your intelligence is so unknown until you reveal it to the world. Do you see? You have to, as if self creates world, world creates self. Self creates world, world creates self. And this is an oscillation between self-awareness in history and then back into sort of a non-existence, an oscillation between existence and non-existence, of how self-awareness, consciousness arises, then dissolves into a sort of change, a sort of how can I say it? It's like ideas are absent in that form. And guys, I'll tell you this. You will have so much energy through the day if you become honest. You will have a lot more energy. And you'll have also, in some sense, as the ancients called it, the spirit of honor and justice. Because honor and justice cannot arise unless they are found to be valuable from an honorable, from a honest dimension of self, of not yourself, let's say your psyche. Let's say an honest subjective dimension. I feel now is a good time to kind of bring some Upanishad quotes into the talk. So this is a quote. These are some. This is a quote from. Okay, I'm just going to read some next level quotes from the Upanishad. This first one is written from Swami Prabhavananda, and his book's called The Upanishads Breath from the Eternal, which is an epic title. Holy shit. This dude's, breathing eternally. Anyways, his quote is, "The little space within the heart is as great as the vast universe. The heavens and the earth are there, and the sun and the moon and the stars. Fire and lightning, winds are there, and all that now is and all that is not." So now from the actual Upanishads, the Upanishads are these ancient books. Like, Indian culture has an incredible wealth to share in regards to metaphysical ideology to philosophy departments in the West. Like, holy shit, like, I don't understand what the humanities are doing, You gotta integrate the best ideas of each community. Anyways, so the Upanishad says, "You are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny." Alright, guys, I'm feeling this song for some reason. I'm gonna keep reading. From Parmananda, the Upanishads. "He who sees all beings in his self, and his self in all beings, he never suffers. Because when he sees all creatures within his true self, then jealousy, grief, and hatred vanish." I'm going to keep reading. Another passage from the Upanishads. "Fire is his head, the sun and moon his eyes, space his ears, the Vedas his speech, the wind his breath, the universe his heart. From his feet the earth has originated. Verily, he is the inner self of all beings." The next passage. "Dreams are real as long as they last. Can we say more of life? Meditation here, this is another passage. Meditation here is not, okay, I gotta change this. Meditation here is not reflection or any other kind of discursive thinking. It is pure concentration, training the mind to dwell on an interior focus without wandering, until it becomes absorbed in the object of its contemplation. But absorption does not mean unconsciousness. The outside world may be forgotten, but meditation is a state of intense inner wakefulness. That was a pretty nice passage. I'm going to move on. I'm just going to keep reading it. Human beings cannot live without challenge. There's more to it, guys. I'm just changing the song. Human beings cannot live without challenge. We cannot live without meaning. Everything ever achieved we owe to this inexplicable urge to reach beyond our grasp, do the impossible, know the unknown. The Upanishads would say this urge is part of our evolutionary heritage, given to us for the ultimate adventure. To discover for certain who we are, what the universe is, what is the significance of the brief drama of life and death we play out against the backdrop of eternity. Wow. Pretty much this passage I just read, it's saying kind of see your current existence as evolution's gift of giving you an ultimate adventure to see who we are and what the universe is. Honestly, I love these books. There's another passage. He says, "He who is rich in the knowledge of the self does not covet external power or possession." Okay, that's pretty like common sense. Thanks, Upanishad. Oh wow. There's this quote that says, "There's no joy in the finite. There's joy only in the infinite." That means like we have an innate urge towards everlasting joy. Strange, but I feel that's very true. Actually, I feel like there's probably an archetype in every human being's mind that wonders about it, or reaches a point where it wonders about it. Another passage says, "As long as man is overpowered by the darkness of ignorance, he is the slave of nature, and must accept whatever comes as the fruit of his thoughts and deeds. When he strays into the path of unreality, the sages declare that he destroys himself, because he who clings to the perishable body and regards it as his true self must experience death many times." My word, I got like, I feel like we should zoom into this and kind of explore it a bit. So, guys, this is the unique turn in tonight's Mr. Within episode. So, this quote in the Upanishads is saying, as long as man is overpowered by the darkness of ignorance, he's the slave of nature and must accept whatever comes as the fruit of his thoughts and deeds. Yeah, so as long as you're ignorant to the laws of nature, you'll be pushed around by the laws of nature. And then he says, when he strays into the path of unreality, so when one has gone, like you're in this ignorance, he says the sages tell you destroy him. The sages declare that he destroys himself. Pretty much what that means is the sages are saying, get rid of that thought of self that is keeping you in that state, you know. And so, because sometimes the world can change, but the inner world requires the self to change. And when your attention leaves from the self you think you are to the self you actually are, the world you thought that was becomes the world that actually is. That's a sort of pretty much, I guess, subconsciously what enlightenment is about. So here in this passage, it's so far it's saying like if you're in ignorance, nature is dictating. You must accept whatever nature brings. So you're in some darkness of ignorance, and then it says whenever a person strays into such a path, like what the sage does is he tells the man destroy himself, get rid of the idea of self that is keeping you in the world of that self, and he says because he who clings to the perishable body and regards it as his true self must experience death many times. So he's saying rather than thinking you know you're temporary, turn your attention to how you don't know if you're eternal. So what it means is, like, you can totally use a temporary technology as a self-aware being. Okay, we are technically, our body is temporary, but I'm saying like ancient mysticism has always wondered if there's something deeper dwelling, something that is just like as eternal as energy that cannot be created or destroyed, yet it changes from form to form. And so, what is the inspiration of the Buddhic thought of incarnation? Why do we see a sort of endless wheel of karmic manifestation? As if a scientist looks at the universe, it's like, look at this limitless beautiful landscape of great inspiration. And I agree, like scientists sees wonder and beauty and limitless exploration. But the Buddha saw this and was like, damn, this is like a sort of karmic wheel of endlessly existential phenomena occurring. That means I find that inner technologies were more real back in the day because they didn't have outer technologies. So pretty much, like when we go look at Buddha's time and just in the ancient world, we see these dudes had nothing to do outside other than fight or play or just basic physical things. There weren't no computers, no gadgets, no fascinating, sophisticated things. Right? So what would evolve their inner realities? Their imaginations were like where like the technology they could use. So when you attach your attention to a temporary system, guess what? It's temporary pattern. Rather, it's sometimes good to be a fool in an elusive world. So anyways, let's move on. I'm going to read a few more of these and then I guess it's going to be a journey's end, There is enough in the world for everyone's need. There is not enough for everyone's greed. Jesus Christ, the Upanishads also have rap lyrics, guys. Another passage says, as a person acts, so he becomes in life. Those who do good become good. Those who do harm become bad. Good deeds make one pure. Bad deeds make one impure. You are what your You are what your deep driving desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. Yeah. Oh man, this is awesome. This quote, I don't know where it's from, but it says, The 5th century Greek writer we know as Dionysius the Areopagite, the Jesus Christ, how do you say this? Dionysius the Areopagite, I don't know, something like that, once said that as he grew older and wiser, his books got shorter and shorter. Yep. Waking up from childhood dreams to an endless reality. Swami Prabhavananda from the Upanishads, he says, that which is not comprehended by the mind, but by which the mind comprehends, know that. So as if this dude was like, this is not like from the Upanishads, from a guy's interpretation of the Upanishad named Swami Prabhavananda, but he says that which is not comprehended by the mind, but by which the mind comprehends, know that. I find this to be an incredible sentence. Oh, wow. I'm going to read these quotes. God is, in truth, the whole universe. What was, what is, and what beyond shall ever be. He is the God of life immortal, and of all life that lives by food. Oh man, that's hilarious way of categorization of human beings. His hands and feet are everywhere. He has heads and mouths everywhere. He sees all, he hears all, he's in all, and he is. I'm pretty sure, like, these guys are saying the world is alive. The world is God. So, you know, we might be God's imagination, guys. Who knows? This sentence is fascinating from Swami Prabhavananda. He says, "To darkness are they doomed who worship only the body, and to greater darkness they who worship only the spirit, because the act of worship is a mental activity." This is why this man says this. It's a trick question. It's a trick, not question, situation. Swami Prabhavananda continues, he says, "The sun, revealer of all objects to the seer, is not harmed by the sinful eye, nor by the impurities of the objects it gazes on, so the one self dwelling in all is not touched by the evils of the world." Yeah. Pretty much he's saying your conscience is untouchable by darkness. Something like that. Wow. This other quote by Paramananda from the Upanishads, this is another person. He says the general teaching of the Upanishads is that works alone, even the highest, can bring only temporary happiness and must inevitably bind a man unless through them he gains knowledge of his real self. This is insane, but what's being communicated here, guys, is that you gotta do work, but you gotta do work that allows you to gain knowledge of your real self. That means you gotta honestly work. This would be the greatest, Wolf of Wall Street motivation, mystical motivation moment, The desire for liberation arises in human beings at the end of many births through the ripening of their past virtuous conduct. Another quote says, "What exactly is the difference between a dream and waking experience? What happens to the sense of I in dreamless sleep?" And they sought invariance in the constantly changing flow of human experience. Is there anything that remains the same? In the constantly changing flow of thought, is there an observer who remains the same? Is there any thread of continuity, some level of reality higher than walking, in which these states of mind cohere? Guys, that was like an enlightenment hack. only he who has a coordinated understanding of both the visible and the invisible, of matter and spirit, of activity and that which is behind activity, conquers nature and thus overcomes death. Pretty much he's saying that only from the changeless you are free of change. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys. This was a long episode, but I always feel like the world exists to give us thoughts, and we exist to give these thoughts back to the world. In that way, we feel we have not strayed from nature before. So thanks for tuning in. And I'm gonna write a question of the day, which I'm starting doing this. I started to do this. And I appreciate whoever if you just clicked on the link of this talk, at least attempt to give some answer to the question. Okay. Question of the day. What should we ask the world?